everyone, John Henry here, slingshotfutures.com, and welcome to the daily futures and crypto market outlook for tomorrow's trading. Tomorrow is going to be the 8th of the month, and really just another kind of gross day of price action. A lot of movement again, but not a whole lot accomplished. Now, gold had a fairly decent day, but really out of all of the markets, I mean, we were fairly inconsistent in terms of movement today, so fingers crossed, now that the ECB press conference stuff is out of the way, we don't have any news tomorrow, hopefully we get a little bit of, I guess, normal market conditions would be the best way to put it, whatever normal is these days. But as always, let's take a look first off at the website itself, slingshotfutures.com. Scroll down and click on the Join the Daily Outlook newsletter. That's going to let you sign your email up with us on our email list so you'll be notified every time one of these videos comes out. Along with that, in the newsletter itself, that gives us the ability to send you any big announcements that may be going on, along with any other markets that may be of interest. We talk about cryptos, futures, options, Forex, you name it. If it moves, it's probably going to show up in there at some point. So it's a great newsletter to get your hands on if you haven't signed up already. Of course, along with that, if you haven't done so, make sure to click on the live trade room and subscription trial info. This is going to let you sign up for a 3-day trial with us in the live trade room so you can see what we're all about. You'll be able to hang out with us for a couple days in the live trade room, see our screens, see what we're doing day in and day out, look at the trades that we're trying to find and pick apart, and it's just a great way to see what it all is and how it all moves. So, of course, inside that live trade room, you are able to ask questions and kind of mingle around with other people. It's just a really great resource. Now, if you do enjoy it, you can sign up as a weekly or monthly member, and if you join as a full-fledged VIP member, don't forget to check out all the little discounts and stuff that are inside the store page there. You get the live trade room as part of the package. So first of all, taking a look at the euro, again, the euro had the ECB press conference meetings, and we had a lot of stuff that had a big impact on the euro, so not a surprise to see just a little bit of movement on the euro. For the most part, though, outside of opening up down here, we are going to be closing out a very bullish-bodied day, a lot of wick on the highs, but you can see inside of this, there is a lot of back and forth. So even though we do have a very strong bull day on our hands, there are a couple levels of concern that we are running into with the euro in terms of consistency. We're not seeing some good consistent movement. It's just a big whip up, a big whip down, a big whip up, a big whip down. It's all over the place right now. So because of that whippiness that we're seeing on the euro, I have to treat it as more of a very wide range. And that means that I'm looking to buy low, sell high. I would prefer to buy low to go along with that trend that's been going on for a couple days now. But at least we're finally getting outside of this big kind of zone, right? That big news candle that caused the market to drop down, actually went up and then dropped down. We're finally breaking out of that and using that as support now. So we do have a longer term buying opportunity to push back up towards the highs as well. And that would be a major objective up at last month's high, which would be at 1.2825. But, outside of that, we do have to kind of approach this as a little bit more of a range. We are breaking out of that kind of brick wall that we've had in place for the last couple days, and we're using it as support now. But that said, when we zoom in, we're at the top of the wedge, so there's just not a lot of room to buy right this second. What I would rather look for is an attempt to push back down again, get a little bit of a pullback, retest the lows of the wedge, maybe even fake break the lows of the wedge before popping higher. Either way, I can't buy where we are right now. I have to wait for a slightly better price before we go jumping in here on the euro. But everything is pointing north, looking for the buyers to step in on any type of pullback, especially a decent one, to finish the job off to 20,505 all the way up to 2650. Over on gold, a good bull runaway type market, and we are going to be closing very high in the day. We have the open down here and the daily close up here, and that is going to equal a very big daily bull candle with a nice bull channel in the mix, right? We have a beautiful bull channel coming off of the highs and the lows working out nicely. We haven't cycled down to the low yet. We've actually missed it, and because of that, that's creating a little bit of a wedge now. The wedge formation overall, if we zoom out, we can see that this is still a very bullish market. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. We're just looking to buy. But because of the choppiness that's coming across through the top here, every time gold is pushed in towards the highs, it got really messy. We saw that several times already, and now we're seeing it again. So that tells us that the buyers may not be that interested in buying this high up. They've been buying aggressively down here on the dips, any type of pullback, but they're losing a little bit of steam up here. And we are sitting right on the highs pretty much right now for gold as well. So basically what that leads us to is to look for a pullback here as well. What I would really like to see is the market to come back down to earlier support. We had a very aggressive sell-off down to the previous high of day at around 47.7, and as soon as it hits it, it rocketed all the way right back up again. So because of that amount of support that's coming in there, I'm very interested to see what happens if we can retest it, get a nice little pullback. Earliest buying area would be the wedge bottom. After that would be the channel bottom, and then the really good one would be down here between 47.7, 47.3, 46.4, somewhere around in there to push the market right back up and finish the job off. I'm not looking for a brand new high or a huge rally to a new high or anything like that. If we get that pullback, we're not seeing the follow through at these highs that I would like to see for something like that. So instead, looking to buy into that dip, assuming that we're probably going to have to take partial off at the very least at around halfway up. And then maybe if we get a little bit of luck and wind in our sails, we may be able to push up towards a new high and finish the job off. Overall, though, looking for a pullback on gold before we can finish off the rally towards the highs. On crude oil is a little bit of a mess. Now, we were kind of expecting crude oil to be a little bit of kind of an interesting scenario. We had the inventories come out, and these inventories had the hurricane impact implemented into them. So any impact that the hurricanes have been having on the crude oil supply as well as natural gas supply is built into this number that we had today, and you can see there is a lot of chop. We've had a big move up, a big move down to a new low, and then the news came out and we had a big move up, and now we're just kind of cycling back down again. We didn't really accomplish a whole lot again on crude oil, even with the inventories. We have an open here, and we're going to have a close, man, right there. So practically a daily doji flat without a body. We're just not getting a directional bias right now on crude. I think the overall movement is we're not really breaking out through the highs, which means that the buyers aren't interested in buying through these tops. They may be looking for a deeper pullback. So my emphasis right now, at least in the short term, in the overnight session maybe, even going into tomorrow's early morning session, would be slightly bearish. I would like to see the sellers come in to push the market down to those areas of interest. 48.85 is the big one, maybe even a little bit lower down to around 48.80, maybe even down to 48.70 or 60, but pretty much anywhere down here. The last time the market was down there, it aggressively bounced out of there. It tested it again, pop out of there aggressively once more. So if we can get another test in this area, the anticipation would be maybe a wedge bottom, a shallow new low, get a bounce off of that for a kill zone right back up again, which is kind of what I'm looking for. So I would love to see a nice pullback here on crude oil to jump on in on the buy side, and preferably at either the wedge lows or a trap low at 48.85 or lower, just something. Because right now, we're right in the middle of this range, and this is not an area that I really want to put any money on the line. It's really nasty inside here. So we have to play it a little bit cautious on crude, give it a little time to wiggle this stuff out. And it may not happen until next week. But right now, I'm waiting for better prices, at least down to 48.85. I am leaning on the buy side in the longer term. In the short term, though, we may be able to find some selling off of 49.22. And then finally, wrapping up on the S&P. Now, the S&P, it really isn't accomplishing a whole lot. Oh, it looks like it hid my lines here. So overall, there we go. We've got the S&P, which is in a very kind of straightforward range. The high looks best at around 67.25. The low looks best at around 24.60. We do also have the previous low of day, or the previous close of day rather, as well as the previous high of day, all coming together in the same location: 60.75, 60.25, and range low support at 60. Lots of support zones down here. There is a potential of this turning into a channel. If we try to put this on the highs, though, we'll notice a little bit of a problem. That one doesn't really fit very well. This one's kind of blowing through the top. All that really leaves us with is maybe a slightly wider channel. We are rotating back towards the highs of the range. Again, the range high looks best at around 67.25. It did have a slight breakout of that move at around 8:30, 9 o'clock. But once that breakout occurred, it failed and started its way right back down again. It couldn't hang on to that breakout move. So because of that, the range just looks a little better, slightly shallowed up. The overall movement that we're getting right now, again, we're not really completing a whole lot in general view. If it weren't for this big nasty candle here, it would look a lot better. We'd have the open down here, a close up here, would look a lot nicer. But because of that candle that started the day off, we have an open here, and we're going to be closing here. That will be a bullish candle, and there is a lot of wick on the bottom. There's a decent amount of wick on the highs as well, but more on the bottom. So that gives us a daily candle that is fairly bullish. It could look a lot better, but it could also look a heck of a lot worse. So the buy side definitely makes a lot more sense here going through with really that continued failure. We saw that big drive lower on the 5th, and it completely shattered on itself and collapsed right, well, I guess collapse, what would be the opposite of collapse, rallied aggressively back up towards the highs. We are running into an area of congestion, right? This is the same place that the market got stuck for a long period of time. We had a good day and a half or so of just price lack of movement more than anything else. We tested it again and it failed, and now we're back in this zone. So even though we do have a bullish bias, and if we zoom really far out, this is nothing more than just a big pullback in an otherwise beautiful uptrend, the overall objective is back to the highs. Again, there are a couple levels of concern. Obviously, the earlier chop playing a little bit of a role here, but also the possibility of falling resistance of a wedge. We initially had a falling resistance wedge right here, and they broke through it, used it as support, used it as resistance, used it as support, so they're not really showing a whole lot of emphasis there. But now we have another one in the way off of that more static high. And that does mean that, well, the buyers got their work cut out for them. They have a little bit more to prove if they're going to keep this train going to the upside. Overall, again, we are treating this like a range buy low, sell high. We're kind of in the middle to the upper edge. I'm not as big a fan of selling. I don't necessarily want to sell this kind of market. I would rather buy it on a pullback, but we may find some selling opportunities at around 67.25 in the overnight. Otherwise, I'm looking for a better pullback down to at least intermediary support, which we can see here. Nice little swing low, swing high, multiple swing highs. Even a little bit of resistance there before turning up. That 64.5 area looks very interesting for a potential maybe kind of late evening bounce, something like that. Obviously, I would love 24.60, but we may not pull back that far. So overall, I am leaning on the buy side, a little bit heavier than the sell side, but we may be able to find some sell side scalps. So that's going to do it for the outlook for the futures markets. Now, don't forget, stick around. You'll be able to take a look at the crypto markets with us, along with a couple interesting ones that are setting up right now. But in terms of news for tomorrow, zero. There is no news tomorrow. There's no big news. There's nothing. So there may be a bunch of small numbers, but that's really not what we're looking out for. No big news tomorrow. And after a big day like today with the ECB conferences, it's kind of a toss in the air in terms of how the market wants to respond. We're coming off the backs of a long holiday weekend this past weekend. We're going into another weekend with Friday being tomorrow. No news at all. It very likely could be an early in, early out kind of scenario, or it might be everyone wakes up a little bit late and then jumps in going into the afternoon. So we'll have to wait and see. But, you know, like we always say, make the plan, trade the plan, follow the rules. You should be okay. Now, jumping over to the cryptocurrency side of things, we've got a lot of interesting movement on the cryptos. First of all, Bitcoin continues to rally up. We have a beautiful rallying to the upside, pushing back into the 4600s, actually almost hitting 4700. What was the high? Did it actually tap it? No, of course not. 46.99. Why would it hit 4700? Bitcoin loves fading off of those 99 levels. So they missed 4,700 by about $1. We're pulling back a little bit, and again, this is a very strong bullish rally, and somewhat of a V bottom type move. We had a drop lower, it V'd out and turned right back around the opposite direction. It looks a lot better, you know, for continued bullishness if we could get at least a little bit of a pullback. You know, that pullback, we've seen this before where it gets really kind of pinned to one side. The pullback ends up not really being much of a pullback, rather than just kind of a range that took its time before hitting an area of support. That may be what we get stuck with having to wait for. But I would love to see a pullback to at least 44.92. Where the earlier levels of interest kind of came into play. That's where we had the earlier swing highs, swing lows, swing lows. If we go even further, we can see that there was a bunch of support there as well. So, I mean, at the very least, around 44.92, maybe a little bit further. I would love to see a trap below 4400s, but we may not get that far down from what we've seen previously on Bitcoin. So everything is looking pretty strong to the upside. I would love to buy a pullback, though, if it lets me. Over on Bitcoin Cash, it did follow through exactly what we were looking for yesterday. Beautiful continuation of the upside for a secondary leg up. I believe I heard that they pushed above 700 again, so a really good move on Bitcoin Cash. Now we're running into a situation of, you know, are the buyers actually here to stay, or did they just do this to get a little bit of extra profit, get a nice run, and then close up shop again? We've seen that before, right? We've seen that before. We had a nice rally up here, and they gave up the ghost. We had another nice rally up here, and gave up. Another nice rally, they gave up. This one looks a little more sustainable. It does look a heck of a lot better than the other ones, but it wouldn't necessarily hurt my feelings to see them come back again to this area of support. We already had the bounce there before, beautiful bounce off of it, maybe a retest of that. wouldn't hurt much. I would love to see a retest of around that 1350 to 1360 area for a continued bounce back up to new highs. For right now, we're looking at this as a potential wedge formation, so we may have you know, a little bit of a weaker follow-up high if it does want to go higher. Maybe around that 15.5 area could be the next area for target, or at least profit taking. But for the most part, Bitcoin Cash doing exactly what it should be doing. Now we just have to wait to see if it'll give us a reason to re-enter. Over on Ethereum, zooming out, we're looking at a daily chart here. Now, normally we look at an hourly chart, but you can see why I'm not a big fan of the hourly. It's just kind of a mess right now, and we haven't had a whole lot to talk about for Ethereum for a while. But if we zoom out a little ways and look at something like a daily chart, we get a little bit of a better picture. We can see that we are in an area of major interest. Now, on the hourly chart, you can see this as well. It's not a surprise. We've been talking about it for a while now. 66, 6,700, beautiful low area to be a buyer in, looking for accumulation to shove the market back up. But this gives us a cleaner picture of the potential kind of range or even wedge that's kind of setting in right now. And we're towards the lows. So I would love to still be a buyer down here. It's just a different view on the same thing that we've been talking about for a while. Ethereum looks ripe for the picking if they can get a push down. And if we can get a big breakdown, like a big bear candle that immediately reverses, could be looking for a trap and a big rally into the weekend to finish the job off. Over on Litecoin continues to show its bullish colors and rising higher. We are getting a little bit weaker up here with a lower high. They missed that mark there. Looking for a potential wedge on the highs. One more rally up wouldn't be a big surprise at around, depending on when it gets there, around 18, maybe 1810 up there. But for the most part, this is very similar to the way that Bitcoin looks. I would much rather see a pullback. Give us something to buy a little bit further down. A pullback at around 16.5 would be beautiful. That would be a fake break of the wedge lows. We'd have some moving average support inside there, previous swing highs acting as support underneath. By that point in time, the 200 may be up there. We've got a lot of things that would look a lot better if we can get a quick snap down on Litecoin to buy into. Again, we were talking about this, I believe, on Tuesday or Wednesday. A potential 50% pullback is very common when you break out of a wedge like we've been seeing here. We haven't even had, I mean, maybe a 25% pullback, if that. So a deeper pullback, I would love to see. Around that 16.5 level would be easy pickings for me to start jumping in if it's able to give it to me. And then a couple ones of interest here. The first one on the list, Trig versus Bitcoin, showing some really good bullish continuation to the upside. We had that big bull rally back right before September started off. They continued it with another leg up that quickly failed back down, but they didn't show the sellers were pounding the market lower, just that the buyers were giving up at the highs and they were looking for better prices. Well, they got those better prices, rallied up, went range bound for a little while, and now we are seeing that continuation. One of two types of scenarios happens when you get that extended period of time and then you go into a continuation move. Either you break out and it immediately fails and rockets back down. That is definitely a possibility. The other scenario, which I am more looking for in this case, is the initial breakout of the range, a pullback to retest that range, and one more push to a new high. That's really what I'm looking for here on Trig. And buying a pullback to, we can put a horizontal line on there, make it nice and easy to see. I would say at around 24,900 if you want to make life a little bit easier. 24,900 is the area of interest for that snapback as support, then to rally back up to new highs shortly thereafter. And then finally, NEO, a really nice looking market setup right now with NEO pulling back. Looks a little bit like a descending wedge or a flag, kind of like Litecoin if you just sort of zoomed into a faster time frame. Now we're looking at a 5-minute chart here, but just to show you that example of the two, and you can actually see I have some positions working on NEO, but buying into this dip kind of with the same assumption. I'm looking for a nice continuation, a pullback, and then a rally back up towards the highs. Major objective to the highs on NEO is at 72.8467 for the upside. Now if we zoom out a little bit to an hourly, we can see that this is a very strong rally to the upside. Let me hide the order history there, clean up the chart a little bit. We had that big breakdown on the Chinese news that they were banning ICOs. Didn't stick around very long before finding a higher low and a major reversal back up. And if we look at this, this looks very similar to a twin reversal. Now, if you're not familiar with what a twin reversal is, it's something we talk about quite frequently, but it's where the market makes a big move down and then a counter move of the same distance roughly. Now, this one has a little bit of gapping in between in the sense that it took a while for it to form, but you can see this big move down is relatively equidistant to this big move up. They're very similar in size, and they had a little bit of chop in the middle. So this is a very bullish indication. Really what I'm looking for is continuation on this move up to the earlier areas of interest, and that's going to be back here. We still have quite a ways to go up towards that 8,000 mark, and plenty of room for the buyers to step on in. So I'm looking at NEO in the short term for some buying pressure to shove the market back up towards that 8,000 mark. So that's going to do it for the overall outlook on both the futures and the cryptos. Really good movement on the crypto side of things. I wish the futures would kind of go along with that. It seems like the futures have been really choppy the last couple of days. Nowhere near as good a price action as last week. But that said, like we always say, depending, it doesn't matter what market you're going and approaching on, make a plan, trade the plan, follow those rules. You should be A-okay. Until next time, we'll see y'all then.